Hey everyone, welcome back to bageltcg. Today we're going to be doing a deck tech on one of, if not the most interesting decks that has shown up in events in the recent few months. We're going to be looking at Michael Hamilton's winning US Nationals Iyslander deck. This is possibly the strongest deck, or one of the strongest decks in the meta right now, but mostly it's just kind of revolutionary in what it was trying to do with Iyslander, and it's a very different approach than basically any other Iyslander was taking at the event, right? So we're going to hop into it here, just hopping straight into the deck, looking at this Iyslander list, which is, I've heard a lot of people call like Battle Mage Iyslander. It's essentially Iyslander that plays some powerful red attack actions to mix in along with the rest of its cards, right? Namely, we've got cards like Enlightened Strike here. Enlightened Strike, a very powerful attack action card that allows us to either come in for 5, go again, 5 or 7, or for 5 and draw a card, which are all pretty solid modes with Iyslander. It also helps hands that have too many red cards in them, letting you bottom one of the red cards with Enlightened Strike. Our other red cards are Scar for a Scar here. This is the 0 for 4 go again. Pretty powerful card. Like the rate 0 for 4 is pretty good, but this deck really abuses a lot of cards that care about if you have less life than your opponent. Since you start at 36 life, being at less life than your opponent is pretty easy, since you are going to be for most of the game. And this deck is kind of looking to pace your opponent, kind of go down with them. You know, they're at 10 life, you're at 8 life, they're at 20 life, you're at 15 life. Kind of go down in life totals with them, using these powerful cards that care about you being at less life until you're able to kill them through a various number of methods at instant speed on their turn, right? So Scar for a Scar is one of those cards. We've also got Wounded Bull, the common from Welcome to Wraith, that for 3 resources comes in for 7 physical damage, but if you have less life than your opponent, it comes in for 8. So 3 for 8, kind of the name of the game with some of these cards. We've also got the rare from Uprising, Fjendal's Fighting Spirit, another 3 for 7 that also has an effect if you're at less life, although this one gains you a life. So kind of a 3 for 8 in a way, since you are getting an extra point of value, but obviously not 3 for 8 damage here. We are playing one extra copy here of the yellow Fighting Spirit. I'm going to assume he just didn't feel like he had enough with just those 3. And those are kind of all of the red attacks, but adds up being 12 red attack actions here with Enlightened Strike, Fjendal's Fighting Spirit, Wounded Bull, and Scar for a Scar. We have the 13th one with the yellow Fighting Spirit, so a decent number of red attack actions. And then outside of that, the only other red cards really are the red Aether Ice Vein, which is another very powerful disruptive card. Most people can't block 5 arcane damage, so you're usually going to take in a card from your opponent's hand. And then we've got Sink Below. Just as a pretty solid defense reaction. We do need something to deal with some number of Dominate. But I think that's all the red cards. So it's only like 18 red cards if I remember correctly. We've got the 12 attack actions, then 3 Sink Below and 3 Aether Ice Vein. So only 18 red cards here. And we have the single yellow card with the yellow Fjendal's Fighting Spirit. Outside of that, the whole deck's blue. It's like 50 plus blue cards, and you're going to be kind of sideboarding around blues a lot, right? You're not always going to be running the full 50 blue cards. Some of these blue cards are useful in different scenarios, right? Like we've got the 1 Scour here. Scour is very, very good against Viscerai. They build up 5 or 6 Rune Chants, and then you can put 5 resources into destroying their Rune Chants and dealing that much arcane damage to them. This kind of makes it so you're essentially dealing double damage, right? Because you're gaining that life by destroying the Rune Chants in addition to dealing the damage. So let's say you pay 6 resources into this to destroy 6 Rune Chants. You're dealing 6 damage and preventing 6 damage at the same time. So a very powerful tempo swing against Viscerai. And that's just one of our blue options for sideboarding. We do have the kind of standard Iyslander Ice Core. We've got Polar Blast, we've got Insidious Chill, Ice Eternal, Ice Bolt, Hypothermia, Heart of Fjendal, Channel Lake Frigid, Cold Snap, Frost Hex, Energy Potion, Emeritus Scolding, Aether Hail, blue Aether Ice Vein. We've got blue Amulet of Ice, Blizzard, Brain Freeze, and then blue Brother in Arms. So most of this is pretty standard for an Iyslander list. I'd say the things that kind of stand out is, for one, blue Brother in Arms. This is interesting as a way to be able to block 4 with an extra resource we've got. I'm not sure how often he's actually attacking with it. I would guess not often. But I can tell he probably didn't have enough blocking in the deck. You do have a decent amount of cards that don't block at all or only block for 2 resources. We've got, Energy Potion and Blizzard that don't block at all. We've got cards like Cold Snap, Hypothermia, and Polar Blast, Insidious Chill that only block for 2. So you're able to convert some of those resources instead of blocking with those cards, pitching them to block for 4 points of damage with Brother in Arms. Other interesting blues, I'd say the only other really interesting blue is Emeritus Scolding. It costs 2 resources and it deals 2 arcane, but if you play it on your opponent's turn, it deals 4 arcane. Obviously, just wanted some extra damage there. This deck is more damage than the traditional Iyslander. Most Icelanders are very setup decks, trying to set up Frost Hexes and do an OTK against a lot of decks, or just deal a lot of arcane damage against other decks. And he's trying to deal a little more burn with attack actions and stuff like Emeritus Scolding, instead of just being a straight disruption deck, right? Like Emeritus Scolding doesn't disrupt your opponent at all; it just deals straight damage to them. So obviously, just wanted some extra points of damage there. He does still have the standard combo that you need to beat Guardians and other setup decks. So you got the Frost Hexes, the Ice Eternals, and the Energy Potions, and then you set up some number of Amulet of Ice and Insidious Chills based on when you find them, what life your opponent is at. There's a certain number of factors that help you determine how much damage you need to push through and how many disruption effects you need to do that, right? Usually you need 2 or 3, let's say, of these disruption effects, but that number can vary. But you pretty much always need at least the 2 energy potions and then some number, usually 2 or 3 of the Frost Hexes to go off with the Ice Eternal combo. And he's sticking with what my team actually ran at Nationals, which is just the Ice Eternal combo, no Sigil of Permafrost, and no Eisenhower Weather Vane. But that's really most of the deck here. And as you can see, it's just a lot of blues, a lot of ice blues, and then these really powerful cards that are either 0 resources or 3 resources for your attack actions that let you really efficiently use your resources, right? Your deck is a lot of blues, so being able to pitch 1 blue and come in with 8 points of value is pretty solid. And then you're able to use your red 0 cost attacks to weave into that as well with your Scar for a Scar and Enlightened Strike. These cards like Enlightened Strike and Scar for a Scar are good for Iyslander in the same way that they're good for Oldhim. They kind of solve the problem of the deck struggling to use 4 cards. A lot of the times these controlling ice decks aren't really good at using all 4 cards. They want to block with some number of them. And against certain decks that really want to set up and aren't going to pressure you that much, it's more efficient to use all 4 of your cards. And you're often not going to need to block it all. And then sometimes you'll have these 4-card hands that you can't even use everything. So cards like Enlightened Strike, cards like Scar for a Scar, let you more efficiently use all of the cards in your hands every turn, which is really what you want to be doing in Flesh and Blood, obviously, right? So that's kind of the main cards in the deck. He's also running a few more equipment than the normal Iyslander deck is. Most Icelanders were just on Coronet Peak here, which is a very powerful headpiece and it's very disruptive. It lets you pitch a blue to make a hero discard a card unless they pay a resource, but obviously not always the pick for him here. He is also running Null Rune Hood, which is just for wizards, just to get you that extra arcane barrier. Brings you all the way up to Arcane Barrier 5, which means you can really just kind of fatigue out the other wizards or at least block a significant amount of arcane damage. And then we have Crown of Providence, which is good into decks like Oldhim, who are often going to run Fyendal Spring Tunic into you, and the Coronet Peak's not really going to do much. Coronet Peak's also really good at helping you keep Channel Lake Frigid around, and against some decks, Channel Lake Frigid just isn't very good, right? Like, Channel Lake Frigid doesn't do a ton for you against Guardians, and so you don't really care about keeping it around too much. So in that scenario, you're mostly blocking with Channel Lake Frigid or pitching it, and you'd rather have Crown of Providence here to prevent some damage and sometimes let you filter your hands a little. So pretty interesting choice. Didn't see any other Icelanders before this on anything except for Coronet Peak, but this definitely gives you some other options against Guardians and decks that you don't need Channel Lake Frigid against when you can run Crown of Providence, and then against other wizards where you can get up to Arcane Barrier 5 with Stormstriders, Nullrune Hood, Metacarpus Notes, and Alluvian Castellas. Outside of that, though, the rest of the equipment's pretty standard. Just Stormstriders for the boots. This is kind of our kill card against other aggro decks. Like I said, you're kind of going to go down in life totals with them. So, they'll deal damage to you, you'll deal damage back to them. You're kind of just slapping each other around until, they go for their kill turn. And, you're at 5 life, they're at 5 life. They go in to try to kill you. And then you're able to, after they've already paid resources to play their cards, already committed multiple cards from their hand into an attack, activate Stormstriders and come in for a decent amount of arcane damage, be it with Blue Emeritus Scolding is a pretty nice one to come in for 4 arcane. We've got Red Aether Ice Vein, and if we're coming in with Red Aether Ice Vein, we can even fuse it and then activate stuff like Amulet of Ice to guarantee that our arcane damage is going to kill. And then we can come in with Waning Mood after. So we can, pretty consistently with either Emeritus or the Ice Veins come in for, if it's Blue Ice Vein, that's 6 arcane, all the way up to 8 arcane with Red Ice Vein, using them in combination with Waning Moon and Stormstriders. And then that's not even counting if we have another damage card in our arsenal, right? So we can throw an Ice Bolt from our arsenal, a Red Ice Vein from our hand, and then Waning Moon from our hand as well, for just a huge amount. That's 11 arcane damage at instant speed, and most aggro decks aren't going to be able to pitch into that, especially if they're pretty red line aggro decks like a FAB or something like that. They're just going to be dead at that point. So Stormstriders are kind of your kill card there. Outside of that, we've got Metacarpus Nodes, mostly just for the Wizard matchup, Alluvian Castellas for the Wizard matchup and for Viserai, very powerful card into Viserai, and then Ironhide Gauntlet into most decks, along with Fandel Spring Tunic into most decks. Just good equipment block and then good resource generation here with Tunic. And that's really the deck. So a lot of blues here, some powerful attacks, and a lot more aggressive, obviously, than a traditional Iyslander, since we do have those 12 red attack actions. And that lets us apply some more pressure onto our opponent and not just always be the defensive deck, right? Sometimes, especially if our opponent's stumbling, we're able to be the aggro deck. I was standing behind Hamilton during one of his games near the end of Nationals, before top 8, and I saw him against an Oldhim go Scar for a Scar, Scar for a Scar, E-Strike for 7. And I was just looking at my teammate like, this guy is on Iyslander, the Wizard, and went Scar for a Scar, Scar for a Scar, E-Strike for 7, coming in for 18 physical damage against this Oldhim, which the Oldhim obviously wasn't expecting and didn't have the equipment to deal with, so had to give him cards from hand and still took a decent amount of damage. So able to really mix it up and punish people that are running a lot of Nullrune and Arcane Barrier equipment, which traditionally does not block at all, and able to punish that non-blocking equipment with some pretty high damage physical attacks. So a really cool type of hybrid damage deck that Hamilton has here that's also really able to disrupt opponents. I mean, against aggro decks, Blizzard here does so much, especially since your opponent gets a Frostbite in Iyslander when you play an ice card on their turn. This essentially taxes aggro decks for 3 whole resources, which is usually pretty impossible for them to deal with unless they have 2 blues in hand, in which case their damage was not going to be that high anyways. But if you watch the finals game of US Nationals, you'll see Hamilton play a Blizzard on every single one of the FAB's Art of War turns and make it so Art of War was essentially just +1 damage because the opponent only got 1 attack in. And that game was not particularly close. It was just Hamilton smashing the FAB down. So really, if you want to watch a game of this deck just destroying something, you can watch the U.S. National Championship finals there of Hamilton into a FAB. But I appreciate your support. Thank you for watching. Let me know what other deck techs you want to see in the description, what other kind of videos you're interested in watching. I'll have a few more decks from Nationals and this calling season coming out. in the following week or two, along with some tier lists and other videos. I, as always, appreciate your support. Remember to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.